So in this passage from the prophet Isaiah, you get classic Israelite prophetic invection against the idols, and the condemnation of idol worship as utterly vain, utterly futile. And of course, we can all, we as moderns, it was like, oh yes, so silly to worship statues. That's just silly, isn't it? So silly to worship things made of silver and gold. So silly to worship things that evoke, uh, military and economic power. Just so silly. We would never do something like that. Well, the prophets, we read the prophets to remind ourselves that we are always in danger of idolizing silver and gold or their modern equivalents, right? And the prophets indicate God's absolute determination to separate us from our idols by any means necessary. He will separate us from anything that takes us away from Him by any means necessary. Ultimately, by sending His Son to die for us and to forgive us our sins, to raise us to life with Him. But we also are called to undergo this time of purgation. That's an Advent, and the penitential kind of spirituality involves purgation, getting rid of idols, getting rid of obstacles to knowing God, to loving God, to obeying God. And in the prophets, in the reading from the prophet today, it says they'll cast their idols away, and they'll let the moles and the bats worship them. They'll throw them down the holes and into caves, which are symbols, of course, of death, of burial. That, in a sense, that you can imagine the Israelite mind, as they buried people either in holes in the ground or in holes in the rock. Those were the two places where people, the dead would be placed. And so animals like moles who clearly lived underground, the place of dead things, and bats who live in those caves where, and again, places of dead things, that to give them to moles and bats to worship is basically would be the equivalent of Jesus saying, let the dead bury their own dead, right? Let dead things go where dead things are. And we are called in this season of Advent to identify within ourselves that which is dead, and to allow that which in ourselves is dead to be placed in dead things place, to be put away from us, so that we can turn towards life finally and decisively, as God has turned towards us in Jesus. So throw those idols in your life, throw those things that which give us that sense of control, or that sense of security, or that sense of well-being that is apart from God. Throw those things to the moles and the bats in your life. Just let dead things be dead, so that you can take life with both hands. A reading from the prophet Isaiah. The Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up and high, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, and against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the high mountains, and against all the lofty hills, against every high tower, and against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. The haughtiness of people shall be humbled, and the pride of everyone shall be brought low. And the Lord alone will be exalted on that day. The idols shall utterly pass away. Enter the caves of the rocks and the holes of the ground, from the terror of the Lord, and from the glory of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. On that day, people will throw away to the moles and to the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, to enter the caverns of the rocks and the clefts and the crags, from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of his majesty, when he rises to terrify the earth. Turn away from mortals who have only breath in their nostrils, of what account are they? The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.